right and what's wrong. But on this night, we do what we want. We make our own rules. This is our night. This is
our show.
On this night, we rise.
This is the bleeding edge of science, technology, and ethics. This is
Solution. Unwilling to submit.
We learn all that is learnable.
Tonight, power shifts. Tonight, we raise our instruments of anarchy.
Peaceful coexistence, encryption, software, secure devices, and our minds.
Tonight, we are unbound by law.
It's time for Sovryn Tech. And now your host, the golden stallion of the tech world, the rated R radio star, Brian Sovryn.
Hey, slapnuts! You got a problem with what the Golden Stallion has to say? Well, I've always said, pick up your own goddamn microphone. Hell, it doesn't even have to be a very good one like the one I'm using now. Open your fucking mouth and get it out there. Talk is literally cheap today, so back it up with the little amount of action that's required and get it out your goddamn self if you have a problem with what I've got to say. Woo! Now, that that's out of the way, I won't even address that. Boy, you want to hear about that stuff, go to Patreon. But now, in case you've noticed, speaking of not so top-notch mics, I am on the Blue Yeti here. I mean, it does the job. No question about that, okay? I'm just saying, you can get your own microphone. You can get it cheap. If you think you can do this show better, you fucking go ahead. You grab your own and you go do it. So, I'm in the dungeon this week, but if you're wondering about the audio, well, there it is. So, anyway, woo! Let's get into some Sovryn Tech. Oh, man. The emails that I get sometimes. One of these days, I'm going to do a show where I'm going to cover all of the, really like the negative emails that come in on everything that I have to say. Look, folks, if you get pissed off that I don't like your little technology, okay, whatever bullshit it happens to be, Ethereum, Steemit, whatever, fucking start your own show, okay? And you can get on there and you can stroke it all night long, okay? And just let everybody, oh, this is so wonderful. There's never anything wrong with anything I'm making here. Oh, all these critiques are so unfair, blah, 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 blah. You do it. No one's stopping you, okay? Speech is still largely free. Fucking shit. Anyway, like I said, it's time for some Sovryn Tech, baby. And I'm telling you, unlike all those other guys out there who maybe don't even start a show in their whole goddamn life, I'm here come rain, sleet, or hell, maybe I'm just going to come in. I might have done that a few times while I've been recording. Woo! But the man of tomorrow, Sabzu, the rated R radio star, is here for you every single week. Always. Now, hell, these days, it's even beyond that. I'm on Patreon, okay? And I am releasing sometimes, 2-3 episodes a week on Patreon. You can get in on that action. It's as little as $1 a month to get the great Q&A episodes. People are loving the shit out of those. And thank you so much. Getting great interactions. It's starting to get lively even on the Patreon page, on the social aspects of it and everything. As little as $1 a month. Now, I'd love it if you did more, but that's all I'm asking. It's pay what you want, okay, for all of this content that's coming out. There's specials. I did another Sovryn Top 8 this week, which was on normal movies, not on science fiction or fantasy movies. And boy, that was a tough one to do because I was like, wait a minute, all the movies I love are science fiction. but that's out there. The Q&As are out there. Some of those have had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on, of course, my co-host on Sex and Science Hour. She's really the main host. I'm more the co-host. But we had a great time doing that last night. We're always here for you, baby. So anyway, go check that out. Patreon.com/SovrynTech if you want to get in on that. Now, let's get into the random access. I've actually got, there's some stories here this week, and it seems so rare that I get to do it. Maybe I shouldn't have opened up with such a negative thing, but fucking shit, I get so pissed off about this stuff. Okay, but there's going to be a lot of good news this week. A lot of cool things to talk about. Not all bad, but there's going to be some bad. And we're going to get into some science, plenty of tech, always plenty of tech. But I want to cover a couple of really interesting science stories this week as well. One of them I had to put off from last week. Now, let's start it off with the random access, and maybe you'll understand a little bit of what was going on. Well, why I felt how I felt at the opening. So I've gotten a lot of emails from people talking about Steemit, saying, Stallion, you've got it all wrong. You don't understand how these things work, blah, blah, blah. Folks, like I said, I spent all of 15, maybe 20 minutes on covering Steemit. Now, if you're on Patreon, I did a 3-hour response episode to the whole goddamn thing. Okay, and maybe I'll splice that up to where it's available, like on YouTube or something. That way people can hear it. Not the complete thing, but, the appurtenant parts of the whole matter. But Steemit, I'm just going to say this, okay? Here's the real cincher. Steemit is this very clever economic trick. It's Keynesian economics put onto, for ridiculous reasons, onto a blockchain. It is incentivizing spending, or incentivizing working within the community, as they like to call it. But real money, real futures, things that last because there is an incentive to save, not to spend. It's straight up. This is such a terrible idea. I don't want to spend any more time on it. I've already said my piece. I might be appearing on other shows to talk about it. When I get there, I'll say everything that's going on. I've had people get in touch with me, and it's so funny. They'll get in touch with me, and then they'll ask me about some like other things. It's like, well, what do you think about Ethereum? What do you think? It's like, no, I hate it. I fucking hate it. And it's like they've never heard this before. They've never heard anybody be critical about this stuff before. I don't mean to pat myself on the back, okay? But clearly, Sovryn Tech is a rare creature in the world, because it's questioning this shit instead of, just giving it all a nice big blowjob and say everything's going to be fine and dandy. No, not on this show. And I don't get bought either. I think there's a lot of people, I have people reach out to me. Saying, yeah, could we work out through, we'd like to, advertise through your show and all this stuff. And a lot of it is just some scammy shit. And yeah, I just say it straight. No, absolutely not. I'm not going to just push anything on here. As to where I know there's a lot of shows, some of those shows get comparable audience levels, or maybe even a little more. I think that's rare that happens, but sometimes they do, because, they're relying, of course, the reason they get listens at all anyway is because of the guests that they have, and their guests kind of, shared around or whatever. They wouldn't, if it was just them talking, they wouldn't get, they'd be lucky if they'd get, 100 listens per show or something like that, in my opinion. But anyway, I know there's a lot of shows in kind of the crypto space and all that where, they'll take on anything, and it's so funny because, like, you can see the sham when you listen to these shows, because they'll have other guests on that completely rip apart something that they talked about maybe the week before or just a couple days before. And they'll just play it up like, oh, yeah, no, you're right. Well, wait, was the guy right last week or was the guy right this week? There's no consistency, and there's no real, I really feel like there's just no critical thinking going on. And I've said this, I think I was talking about in some of the Q&A episodes on Patreon. I have the mistake of where I think I confuse a lot of my principles, a lot of things. And I know this show reaches out to more than, anarchists and libertarians and all that. Okay. But, that was my initial kind of listener base. I'll admit to that. But, with this, I guess I confuse those ideas, like anarchism, libertarianism, whatever, with critical thinking. I guess I thought they were part and parcel, like they were just, one, you couldn't have one without the other, but I guess that's not fucking true. Anyway, I'm being very broad. I don't want to, I said my piece on Steemit. It is an economic scheme, okay? And it is an unsustainable, absolutely unsustainable model, just like, the economic model that most of us live within today. I mean, I don't get it. I'm not even a guy that goes rah Mises Institute or anything, but they have made such beautiful cases against Keynesian economics, and yet here you people are begging for a system like Steemit that, integrates Keynesian economics, onto a blockchain. Really, it's a demurrage currency. It's just like, what was that thing, Frycoin back in the day? Do you remember that in 2013, which got some interest? And I even said it's interesting because it's different. I know it's not going to work because that kind of system doesn't work. Okay, where it incentive, kind of forces you to spend. Steem is an inflationary currency, okay? But it does little tricks here and there by not letting you access all the currency, and that's how that, it makes you think that it's not inflationary. Okay, it's all just this big fucking trick. You will not convince me otherwise because it is a fact that that's how it's set up. And there are fortunately some smart people out there that know it. Okay, but just stop emailing me about this. You are wrong. And the people that are developing and that are excited about it are fucking confused. They are very confused. Okay, I didn't mean to start off, open up with all of that. It's just, holy fucking shit. And I mean, and then, some people, all right, I'll say this. Some people give me that argument that, well, it's not about, the currency. Stop thinking about it as currency. It's about having the social network, and it's about getting away from Facebook and for anarchists to really have a social network that they control. Are you kidding me? Liberty.me? Has no one else ever heard of this? For what it was, for what it is, it's set up very nicely. It doesn't have the ads, which that's what everybody says to me. It's like, well, it's just so nice to be on a platform that doesn't have ads. Well, then go on liberty.me. There's no ads there. And that's totally run by libertarians, very principled people, and anarchists and all that. Super principled. You got Jeffrey Tucker running it. Even though I may disagree with him on some things, I think he's one of the good guys. Why don't you go to that? No, because it is about making money. But the way you're making money, that money is shit. Under any economic model that you'd look at it, this is ridiculous. And honestly, a lot of the libertarians, the anarchists, whatever, that are really promoting this model and that are pushing it and everything. I mean, I think I've noticed, I've seen the kind of the narrative change a little bit. I have a point, but I've seen the narrative change. A lot of people are starting to admit, yeah, this is going to crash and burn. But right now, I just want to make the money off of it. Okay, that's what I've been saying this whole time, is that you can make money on it now, but this is not sustainable. I've said that from the very first episode that I ever talked about Steemit, that was the deal. When I was on Free Talk Live, that's what I said. On every single appearance I've had to make, and I've had to make quite a few recently, okay, I've said, yes, you can make money on it now, but it's not sustainable. Is there anything wrong with you going into that model? No, I can't, I can't see any reason to stop you. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean that it's something worth, telling everybody to get on board with. I mean, it's bullshit. I want things that last. But my main point that I want to bring up, and I'll talk about that, making things that last. My main point that I want to bring up is that I think, and I've said this, maybe I said it in the Steemit special that I did on Patreon, or maybe it was in the main episode. I don't exactly remember. Okay, but I'm going to make a website when this comes, when this finally does crash, and it will. I'm going to make a website that lists the names of all the people that pushed to no fucking end using Steemit and trying to make some kind of bank off of it. And I am and I'm going to say, these are the people, they told you to get on board with these things, and they told you to get on board with the scam. With something that was not meant to last. And that is just bad for business. To build things, I mean, this is the problem with all of Silicon Valley, is that everything's meant to either get, acqui-hired or to be an acquisition, to get bought out, by some larger company. Nothing is actually, so few things are actually getting built, to go the long haul today. I mean, it's going to be weird. Like, I don't know exactly what the landscape's going to look like in the next 10 years. I mean, pretty much any company you could think of right now sure as hell isn't going to be there. It's just so nuts. And there's nothing wrong with making things to last. I think that's something else. I complain about that all the time, that the quality of things, they don't make it like they used to, right? And then people say, it's like, well, the way the competitive markets work and all this, you really can't make it like you used to, with computers and whatever else and all this stuff. I call bullshit on the whole thing. Okay, you can make things like you used to. You can make things to last. Nobody buys a boat and expects to replace it a year later. Nobody does that. Nobody buys an airplane and expects it a year later, to replace the damn thing. When you buy those things, you damn well expect those to last for decades. You might have to do a little refitting. You might have to do a little work on it late, in 20, 30, 40 years, but those things are still built with quality. You pay a premium, sure, but then charge us the premium. Give us the fucking option to even buy things that come at a premium, because that option's not there anymore. Give us the option of systems, that come at a premium that we can get involved in and that we can see are meant to last. It's such horseshit what people push on you today. Everything just feels like a get-rich-quick scheme or whatever. It's just made to eventually fail so that in a year later or 2 years later, you just have to buy a new one. And God damn it. I think I'm conflating a lot of things. I'm just so frustrated about this. And there you have it. But we're going to get into some good news. Why don't we break into the random access here? Well, I did have the Steemit thing in the random access, so I guess we already started breaking into it. But god damn. Yeah, I am going to call the people out. I'm telling you, I am going to call the people out that were, schlepping this and promoting this as being a big deal. And I want you to say, another failed project by such and such person. Unbelievable. So, now, something else that might be a scam. No. All right, it's not really a scam. But something that came out, and I think it's interesting that it took about a week for it to happen, but there's some interesting points about it, and that is that we supposedly have found a very close exoplanet that could be habitable for humanity. And the planet is called Proxima b. This is part of, one of our nearest, if not the nearest star system to ours, which is Proxima Centauri, which I think is interesting because I had no idea about this. But then last week during the Climax, I was reviewing the miniseries, the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, Ascension, which was all about getting to Proxima Centauri. Kind of weird. And actually the way they described the planet on that, I mean, I guess this has been kind of bantied about and argued about for a little while. Just now they've more or less made it official. That was kind of the gist of that whole miniseries is eventually getting to Proxima, to some planet around Proxima Centauri. And you end up seeing what that planet looks like. And interestingly enough, it kind of sounds like the way they describe Proxima b. I find that fascinating. So anyway, Proxima b, now there's already supposedly plans, and probably largely through something we talked about previously on Sovereign Tech, which was Breakthrough Starshot, which is, a program of sending like nano-robotic probes, to other star systems. Not humans, literally like robots the size of, say, maybe even smaller than like a Raspberry Pi, significantly so. But that's why they're calling like nanorobots and all that. And that those, they have to work on how does the communications get back to us well enough. But the idea is that we could be exploring another planet. The excitement around Proxima b is that we could be exploring another planet, and we could be getting real-time data we could be getting data from it within just a generation, which is, generation anywhere, 20 or 40 years. And that is exciting. I'll agree with that. I don't think humans, unless you highly develop, cryogenics, I don't think humans are ever going to get there. Now, there's some question because it is the star of Proxima around, that Proxima b goes around is an M-class dwarf star. And so these are ones, they don't, let's just put it this way, they don't burn as hot. They don't burn as brightly. As our yellow sun, as it does. So for life to be there, it actually has to be a lot closer. In fact, the Proxima b is significantly closer to its star, to its sun, than Mercury is to our sun. but it needs to be that way. And there's some questions about whether or not life could develop on such a planet. That becomes the big, the other question is like, okay, when we get there, or when our probes get there, which, I mean, feasibly, I think, yes, that can happen. Probes can get there. I just don't think humans are going to be heading there anytime soon. I will talk about that another time if people want me to, redress that issue. Maybe I'll get to it in a Q&A on a Patreon episode. But anyway, when our probes get there, will there be life? And there's concerns because, so a planet needs to be a lot closer to, to an M-class dwarf to be able, to be in that kind of, that version of a Goldilocks zone where life can kind of thrive. But it's a catch-22 there because you are also that much closer to, a large amount of radiation. So you really, there's a real problem, with that. Like you're getting a greater intensity of UV. Now, some people are saying that if the life were biofluorescent, which is similar to, like, you see a lot of fish with biofluorescence and some other forms of life, like in the ocean and everything. If they're biofluorescent, they could theoretically live off of, there could be liquid water there, but I mean, some form of animal life could theoretically, exist under that level of UV because the biofluorescence, could kind of capture what's going on and also, be protected at the same time. That's my understanding of how that works. So there's the chance that there's some kind of animal life there. I'll admit that's very exciting. And I'm notorious for saying to people, I don't think there are a lot of sapient, intelligent life forms, and sapient is the key term. Okay, in the universe, I really, really don't. But I am not opposed to the idea of there being, millions and billions of microbes and other forms of, animal life and things like that. So maybe there's such a thing on Proxima B. Either way, it is, it's worth getting, this one's a little more worth getting excited about because it's a little more legit that there's something there. But I do find it interesting that, just within the past year and a half, you make this kind of major show that was supposed to be all about going to Proxima Centauri instead of like Alpha Centauri, some of these other systems that some people think there might be, exoplanets around. I don't know what the deal is there, but there might be some kind of deal there. Anyway, Proxima B, that's the story. And well, we'll see. I mean, maybe some of us, some of you listening to the sound of my voice and me myself, will be able to find out if there is something actually there. Again, I don't see, we're going to get into this later during the climax. We've got a really interesting, I'll say it's a movie, but it's a little more than that, to talk about. But, I don't think that humans are going to be colonizing that, but I am all for humans getting their asses into space and staying there. Absolutely. So anyway, enough for Proxima B. Let's get into a little tech news here, a little more tech news here. This is quite the thing. If you have an iPhone, I assume you've already heard about this, and I think Apple was even, doing like push messages of sorts to get you to update to, I think it's iOS version 9.3.5. And what was discovered by, I think it was Lookout, and there's another company, Lookout, of course, that makes antivirus software for mobile. They discovered what they call Trident. And Trident is this triple threat of 0 days. And triple threat as in these 3 0 days chain off of each other to where you effectively have one-click access into anybody's iPhone. That's the short and sweet version of that. Okay, now, so yes, you want to update to iOS 9.3.5 right away. What's really interesting about it is that this was, who committed this action, like who, perhaps who set up this little triple threat, or as Lookout named it, Trident. And what it is, it's a company, it's effectively what you could call a cyber arms dealer. Okay, as in they sell cyber weapons, they sell 0 days and various other, perhaps kits and things like this. But the NSO group out of Israel. Now, that doesn't mean that they're attached to the government, but they are known for selling to governments regularly. So this is where things get strange. And there's huge issues that get created with this. Again, this was more or less one-click access into every iPhone on the planet. And Apple got right on top of it. I'm glad they pushed out an emergency update. Like I said, it's iOS version 9.3.5. Make sure you're on top of that, okay, if you have an iPhone. But I mean, this really raises a ton of questions. Maybe I'll get into more of them with or not questions, but a whole lot of issues. And maybe I'll get into them more during HackSec in this episode. But, we've got a real problem. I mean, this is something, in fact, I briefly talked about this in a Q&A episode on Patreon, but when you have governments, it incentivizes, now I'm not, how to put this, depending on how something like this was used. I mean, really, any security exploit, I think, is a bad thing. As far as what people do with it, I mean, we're going to talk into some gray areas as far as that goes. Okay, but let's say this was used for some degree of malicious intent, and thus, it's a crack instead of a heroic hack. Crack is a bad thing. Then, when you have governments, when you have authoritarian systems, it incentivizes malicious, malicious code, malicious actions, malicious actors, malicious markets, perhaps, such as, this quote-unquote cyber weapons dealing. I mean, that's kind of the way that the news is pushing it, but I mean, that's all meant to just scare people. I mean, it is concerning, no doubt about that. As far as what to even do about this, in a lot of ways, I think the real answer just comes down to, decreasing your attack vectors. And what I mean by that is, the more devices you have, the more you spread out all of your personal information, these things are guaranteed to happen. I mean, zero days, bugs, exploits and all that. I mean, they are kind of a nature of the beast, as it were. I mean, I think there's solutions to a lot of this. One of them being if you open source the shit out of everything, which a lot of the keys to the kingdom with iOS, are not open source, nor are the protocols. The way they even do things, which there's no reason, as far as the idea and how they set it up, there's not a whole lot of reason, I think, to keep that a secret. Go ahead and say how your protocol works. You don't have to share the code. I mean, it's nice if you did, but you don't have to, but they don't even do that. Okay, so there's a lot of what I consider not best practices that leads to these things even being viable, that leads to Trident being a viable issue. But the other thing is maybe stop, and I've talked about this a few years ago, and off and on I bring it up on Sovryn Tech, but maybe stop relying so much on your phone. Maybe stop putting so much, really pertinent stuff on your phone, such, very important, crucial data on your phone. And then shit like this doesn't matter. But, the thing is that people do, and so it becomes a very, very attractive target. And with the phone, you as the user have so little options to really take control of your own security as to where I think on the, more desktop/laptop side, you have a lot of options, and ones that have been not just a lot of options as far as, that there's more, but you have options that have been time tested. It's really important, to do that. Now, I know some people are going to bring up, well, there was a crack effectively with PGP, which is my preferred system of encrypted communications. That I understand if people prefer more to use OTR or Signal and things like this, but PGP is my personal favorite as far as encrypted communications go. That doesn't mean I don't use others. I'm just saying that's my my favorite one. Partly because it's really so federated and it doesn't rely upon, you paying a phone company or using a Google Voice number or something. But, I mean, there's other reasons beyond that. But, PGP also, there's an exploit there. Again, nature of the system. But it got fixed very quickly, and largely because PGP is open source. It could get found, and, a group could get together in no time, of concerned individuals, not people necessarily out there to make a buck, and they fixed it. So there's examples of how to do these things right and how to make them happen. I mean, be clear here. Apple did not discover this. Apple keeping things closed source did not stop Trident from happening. That's a problem. If it was open, all kinds of, yes, fortunately, Lookout, could kind of notice it and figure it out and backtrack, and they get in touch with Apple, and then Apple goes into their code and confirms the whole thing. But that's you could really simplify that whole process by just having everything be open source. I'm not saying it's unethical to have closed source. I'm just saying that open source is a far superior model to do things in. So anyway, this is very interesting. Not a whole lot's known about the NSO group, very little, but it is definitely a group that works with governments. Again, this is another example of kind of corporatism. It's like, well, I mean, hey, they're not a government, so they must be all right. No, that doesn't mean that, because really they're still working with governments. Yeah, they're not the NSA. Sure, they're not. What's the group? 2800. That's like the Mossad's version of the NSA, or that's the Israeli government's version of the NSA. Sure, it's not them, but in many ways they're just as bad, because they're selling off to governments. They might as well be an arm of the government, much like a lot of other tech companies. So corporatism, very real. And here's another proof of that. And here's another proof of why you want to open source things, so that these bugs, this bug, whatever, this Trident thing, so serious. If a lot of the code was opened up and a lot of the protocol was opened up, as far as with iOS, man, it probably could have been discovered years ago. So, depending on how long it was in there's still a lot of research going on with that. So anyway, update your devices, please do. Why don't we break into, before I get into, we got an awesome, incredibly positive, believe me, this is good news, main story that I want to get into. Okay, but before I do, here's, I got a question about this, and it's important, so I want to bring it up here. I don't want it just for some Q&A episode. I want it mentioned here. And this is a two-part story. Okay, Opera, which Opera is, probably the number 3, number 4, depending on whose metrics you look at, most popular web browser in the world today. And there's, in many ways, nothing really wrong with it. Like, I think it's a fine browser. It has I definitely recommend using Opera over using Google Chrome, especially if you want to take advantage of a lot of what Chrome can do. A lot of what the Blink engine offers, and its compatibility with other systems, and you can even use some of the the Chrome extensions, with Opera if you set your things up right. And of course, there's Vivaldi, which is another system. But anyway, this has nothing to do with Vivaldi. This has to do completely with Opera. Now, Opera. Let's understand a couple things. One is that this is a company that was bought out, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but it was a company that I think a couple of years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago, was bought out by a Chinese investment firm. Okay, so Opera is effectively owned, by a Chinese company. Understand that. It's not. That's why Vivaldi's off doing its own thing. It's a completely separate company, by one of the creators of the Opera web browser. Okay, so understand that that's what you're dealing with here. Now, that company, interestingly enough, bought out. I think it was Surf VPN. I think is the name of it. And this was about a year ago. And Opera has integrated this built-in VPN service into their web browser. Now, just this past week, they released an app for Android. For mobile in general, that is an Opera VPN, and it's totally free. It's unlimited data, because a lot of people are like, yeah, I'd use a VPN, but I have to pay a subscription, however much a month and blah, 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 so I don't want to bother using a VPN. Some people emailed me asking, do you think that this is viable and all this? And it's like, well, understand that Opera's, how Opera makes money is through an ad-based system. If they want you going through a VPN, that raises a few, I don't know exactly where they're making money off of running a free VPN. Maybe it's just to try to get eyes pointing at Opera, but something about it just doesn't rub me right. I don't think that's okay. And it's it's also very strange that a Chinese company, which the Chinese government, not the companies, but the government, although you could say they're one and the same. I'm not saying that, I'm saying you could say that if you felt that way. Okay. But the Chinese government is really against VPN use because it's allowing a lot, it's getting them past the great internet firewall of China, right? So what's happening here? Why would a Chinese company, how would they even be allowed to develop a VPN and start integrating it into the browser or release a free, mobile app to do so? I am not 100% sure, what's going on here. I'm just saying I wouldn't trust it. I'm not saying, then why would you recommend to use Opera? I'm not saying I recommend using Opera. I'm just saying, like, for what a VPN is meant to be used for, I would not use one tied into a company like that. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Now, to really drive the point home, something else happened to Opera just yesterday. So that would have been, this is recording on August 27, 2016. So this would have been the 26th of August on Friday. And Opera announced, and I know I got the email because I have like an Opera account that I test things out on. And I got the email, but there was being reported that there was that their servers, that Opera servers got hacked, and that if you did Opera Cloud Sync on the browser to where it stored your passwords, stored all your bookmarks, stored your history, stored all this different stuff, okay, just like kind of like having a Google account, but in this case, it's an Opera account. If you had that Cloud Sync set up, you need to immediately change all your passwords. You know, you need to go apeshit and get everything straightened up because, you know, quote unquote hackers probably have access to all of your passwords and, you know, your entire, you know, internet history and all of the stuff, anything that you did within Opera. Now, one could say that, you know, fortunately that not a whole lot of people use Opera. I mean, there's plenty, but you know, not many. So first order of business is absolutely yes, change your password. Okay. But, you know, doing this this shows more problems with the cloud. Okay. With a lot of this Cloud Sync stuff, I get that it's really handy to have all of that stored, you know, with Opera. Okay. And to be able to, like, especially from mobile to desktop, to be able to switch in between, or, you know, you could just like forward URLs or whatever, you know, up to Opera and all of that. I understand that. But, you know, if you are going to, let's say that you are using Opera's VPN to do something that could be considered illegal in your country, and then suddenly you find out, well, shit, Opera's servers have been hacked. I mean, did all that VPN data also, you know, get access to by some malicious group? It really brings to mind the problems with centralization. There are central points of failure. And now, you know, if you were going to trust Opera's VPN, I mean, there is the potential that a lot of things that you were doing just got, you know, into the hands of some group, and that group could have sold it off to a government, kind of like the NSO group did with, you know, with the Trident exploit. It's very concerning. So I don't blame you if you want to stay away from Opera. That makes sense. But I would question even doing a lot of the Cloud Sync stuff, unless it was getting, you know, unless your data was getting encrypted client side, and, you know, that it was just pushing. You know, this is the importance of encryption too, is to, you know, where you can, with the encryption, you could just push the encrypted data, say, to your mobile version of the browser, and then, you know, the browser could, you know, can figure out what to do from there with the encrypted data. But that's not how these things, you know, get set up, because these companies, for whatever reason, just don't care. And of course, maybe because now it's a Chinese company, they are or they are compelled, perhaps, to share it with the Chinese government. I'm not vilifying China here. I'm not that kind of person. Okay, I'm just saying, you know, that this is where all this kind of leads, I think. So very concerning. You know, it's definitely something to worry about if you do use Opera. I'm not saying stop using Opera, but I am saying, you know, think about what your best practices here as far as web browsing goes and how you're setting things up. I mean, that, you know, that's like, you have autofill in Opera. That means credit card numbers could be taken. All these different things could be taken when you store everything, you know, up on some server. You're not doing client-side encryption. You know, it makes. I hope it brings up some trust issues for you. That's the shtick. So, and I'm not saying there's any browser necessarily that does it better. And this wasn't even a flaw with the browser, because it's like, well, should I use Firefox? No, the problem is the way it's all set up. The problem is that this Cloud Sync is all, you know, being server based and all being handled server side. That's the problem. And there's other ways to go about it. Fortunately, like I said last week, and I was so excited about this, that MadeSafe is an alpha, and this is something that maybe it could solve. You know, that kind of that evolution of the concept of the cloud. I think that's very exciting. So solutions are coming. I don't think running off to some other browser is necessarily the answer here. I think this kind of thing could have happened to any one of them. And, you know, as far as government parties go, it does happen to every one of them. It also brings up for me, of course, you know, a concept I've said many times, which is that you want to have as few accounts as possible. That way, you know, and also, I mean, it also brings up the little black book, which I've said, you know, instead of using like a password manager. Now, if you use LastPass, understand that this, you know, I'm not 100% certain on this. If your master LastPass password would be stored by Opera, I don't think that's how that would fly, especially if you're using like the desktop app for like LastPass or for NPass, one of those password managers, that wouldn't be an issue. If you're using a password manager, you know, I think to some degree, you're safe out of this. to some degree. But it does bring up, what I've always recommended, which is using the little black book, okay, where you never store your passwords, into the browser. You just write them down. And like I said, this stuff isn't encrypted. Even Google Chrome, all of the passwords that you tell Google Chrome to save, that's all in plain text on your computer. That's insane. Why? I mean, that's the worst practices possible, but people don't know or they don't care. And they're just like, oh yeah, use Google Chrome. Or fortunately, hopefully they use, you can use Google Chrome, but please use some kind of password management outside of the browser itself, because these things happen. So anyway, all right, enough of that. What else do we have in the random access here? I think that's got it. Well, I'm going to give you one more hint. I am very honored to have been reached out, and this is something else I've already mentioned like 2-3 weeks ago on Patreon. I have a lot of, we've been covering recently in a lot of episodes, stories about, the torrent scene, what's happening with torrents, of course, Artem Volin, free Artem, baby, getting arrested, getting extradited by the U.S. government for allegedly running kick-ass torrents, the largest torrent site on the internet at the time. Obviously it's gone now, and like I said, it probably won't be coming back. But I have fortunately been reached out to by some very elite torrent groups, and I'm very honored by this. And they said they personally said that they would like to keep me abreast of what are the new sites, what's being built and all this stuff. Now, like the founder of the Pirate Bay had said, he kind of hopes that things evolve beyond torrent sites and we start using newer technologies, kind of like ZeroNet, or maybe even MadeSafe, things like RetroShare or stuff like that. Well, he didn't mention RetroShare. I'm mentioning that, for our file sharing. But I'm honored that and I'm fairly certain, that I have a degree of trust in these people. So I will share with you if you need a new torrent site, because all of them are dropping like flies. We talked about that. I recommend, it's worldwidetorrents.eu. I will put the link in the appendix of the show notes for episode 190. But that's what you're looking for. So worldwidetorrents.eu, it's a new site. Nemesis43 is there, who is really well known for uploading, talk about 0 day comics, comic books as they come out. It's really something. So that, in my opinion, looking at it, it doesn't have as broad a catalog, but I like the way that they're doing it right from the get-go. They're cataloging things to a lot of precision, which was the great thing about Kick-Ass Torrents, is how easy it was to find exactly what you're looking for. They're doing a good job of that, but it's already the best site, in my opinion, on the out there for torrenting comic books. But you're gonna you really want to check that out. I've looked at it, and I think it looks pretty good. So worldwidetorrents.eu. Now let's get into our main story this week. I've been talking forever here about all these random access stories. Our main story this week is an interesting one, and how I'm going to. We're going to talk about mushrooms. And the funny thing is that I had this story lined up for Sovryn Tech earlier in the week. It came from IO9, the specific story that I found. But then somebody emailed Stephanie, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and said, I would love to hear you guys talk about this on Sex and Science Hour. But Stephanie's like, well, you already had it lined up, so you can do it for Sovryn Tech. And cool. So I'm going to talk about it here. And now I'm not talking about mushrooms. I'm not talking about taking mushrooms. I'm not talking about anything along those lines. That's not my bag. It's fine if it's yours. I am not one for, psychedelics and all that stuff. That's just not my thing. So, but I want to open this up. I want you to listen to a TED Talk. Okay. It's about 10 minutes, maybe a little over. Okay. But this will bring up, trust me, the juice is worth the squeeze on this one. Okay, so let's cut right to it, and I'll come back after because there's a lot more to talk about as far as this goes. Believe me, you won't expect what this is all about. And the guy, you're going to be hearing from, Paul Stamets, he's going to say some things. He talks about, carbon credits, environmentalism, and all that. But I want you to get past all that because mushrooms might be the technology of the future.
I love a challenge, and saving the Earth is probably a good one. We all know the Earth is in trouble. We have now entered into 6X, the sixth major extinction on this planet. I often wondered if there was a united organization of organisms, otherwise known as uh-oh, and every organism had a right to vote. Will we be voted on the planet or off the planet? I think that vote is occurring right now. I'm going to present to you a suite of 6 mycological solutions using fungi, and these solutions are based on mycelium. The mycelium infuses all landscapes. It holds soils together. It's extremely tenacious. It holds up to 30,000 times its mass. They're the grand molecular disassemblers of nature, the soil magicians. They generate the humus soils across the land masses of Earth. We have now discovered that there is a multi-directional transfer of nutrients between plants mitigated by the mycelium. So the mycelium is the mother that is giving nutrients from alder and birch trees to hemlock, cedars, and Douglas firs. Dusty and I, we like to say on Sunday, this is where we go to church. I'm in love with the old growth forest, and I'm a patriotic American because we have those. Most of you are familiar with portobello mushrooms, and frankly, I face a big obstacle when I mention mushrooms to somebody. They immediately think portobellos or magic mushrooms, their eyes glaze over, and they think I'm a little crazy. So I hope to pierce that prejudice forever with this group. We call it mycophobia, the irrational fear of the unknown when it comes to fungi. Mushrooms are very fast in their growth, day 21, day 23, day 25. Mushrooms produce strong antibiotics. In fact, we're more closely related to fungi than we are to any other kingdom. A group of 20 eukaryotic microbiologists published a paper 2 years ago erecting Opisthokonta, a super kingdom that joins Animalia and fungi together. We share in common the same pathogens. Fungi don't like to rot from bacteria, and so our best antibiotics come from fungi. But here is a mushroom that's past its prime. After they sporulate, they do rot. But I propose to you that the sequence of microbes that occur on rotting mushrooms are essential for the health of the forest that give rise to the trees that create the debris fields that feed the mycelium. And so we see a mushroom here sporulating, and spores are germinating, and the mycelium forms and goes underground. In a single cubic inch of soil, there can be more than 8 miles of these cells. My foot is covering approximately 300 miles of mycelium. This is photomicrographs from Nick Reed and Patrick Hickey, and notice that as the mycelium grows, it conquers territory, and then it begins to net. I've been a scanning electron microscopist for many years. I have 1,000 electron micrographs, and when I was staring at the mycelium, I realized that there are microfiltration membranes. We exhale carbon dioxide, so does mycelium. It inhales oxygen, just like we do. But these are essentially externalized stomachs and lungs. And I present to you the concept that these are extended neurological membranes. And in these cavities, these microcavities form, and as they fuse soils, they absorb water. These are little wells. And inside these wells and microbial communities begin to form. And so the spongy soil not only resists erosion, but sets up a microbial universe that gives rise to a plurality of other organisms. I first proposed in the early 1990s that mycelium is Earth's natural internet. When you look at the mycelium, they're highly branched. And if there's one branch that is broken, then very quickly, because of the nodes of crossing, internet engineers maybe call them hot points, there's alternative pathways for channeling nutrients and information. The mycelium is sentient. It knows that you are there. When you walk across landscapes, it leaps up in the aftermath of your footsteps trying to grab debris. So I believe the invention of the computer internet is an inevitable consequence of a previously proven biologically successful model. The Earth invented the computer internet for its own benefit, and we now, being the top organism on this planet, is trying to allocate resources in order to protect the biosphere. Going way out, dark matter conforms to the same mycelial archetype. I believe matter begets life. Life becomes single cells become strings, strings become chains, chains network. And this is the paradigm that we see throughout the universe. Most of you may not know that fungi were the first organisms to come to land. They came to land 1.3 billion years ago, and plants followed several hundred million years later. How is that possible? It's possible because the mycelium produces oxalic acids and many other acids and enzymes, pockmarking rock and grabbing calcium and other minerals and forming calcium oxalates. Makes the rocks crumble in the first step in the generation of soil. Oxalic acid is 2 carbon dioxide molecules joined together. So fungi and mycelium sequester carbon dioxide in the form of calcium oxalates, and all sorts of other oxalates are also sequestering carbon dioxide through the minerals that are being formed and taken out of the rock matrix. This was first discovered in 1859. This is a photograph by Franz Huber. This photograph was taken in the 1950s from Saudi Arabia. 420 million years ago, this organism existed. It was called Prototaxides. Prototaxides, laying down, was about 3 feet tall. The tallest plants on Earth at that time were less than 2 feet. Dr. Boyce at the University of Chicago published an article in the Journal of Geology this past year determining that Prototaxides was a giant fungus, a giant mushroom. Across the landscapes of Earth were dotted these giant mushrooms all across most land masses, and these existed for tens of millions of years. Now, we've had several extinction events, and as we march forward, 65 million years ago, most of you know about it, we had an asteroid impact. The Earth was struck by an asteroid, a huge amount of debris was jettisoned into the atmosphere, sunlight was cut off, and fungi inherited the Earth. Those organisms that paired with fungi were rewarded because fungi do not need light. More recently, at Einstein University, they just determined that fungi use radiation as a source of energy, much like plants use light. So the prospect of fungi existing on other planets elsewhere, I think, is a foregone conclusion, at least in my own mind. The largest organism in the world is in eastern Oregon. I couldn't miss it. It was 2,200 acres in size. 2,200 acres in size, 2,000 years old. The largest organism on the planet is a mycelial mat, 1 cell wall thick. How is it that this organism can be so large and yet be one cell wall thick, whereas we have 5 or 6 skin layers that protect us? Mycelium, under right conditions, produces a mushroom. It bursts through with such ferocity it can break asphalt. We were involved in several experiments. I'm going to show you 6, if I can, solutions for helping to save the world. Battelle Laboratories and I joined up in Bellingham, Washington. There were 4 piles saturated with diesel and other petroleum waste. One was a control pile. One pile was treated with enzymes. One pile was treated with bacteria. And our pile we inoculated with mushroom mycelium. The mycelium absorbs the oil. The mycelium is producing enzymes, peroxidases, that break carbon-hydrogen bonds. These are the same bonds that hold hydrocarbons together. So the mycelium becomes saturated with the oil, and then when we return 6 weeks later, all the tarps are removed, all the other piles were dead, dark, and stinky. We came back to our piles covered with hundreds of pounds of oyster mushrooms, and the color changed to a light form. The enzymes remanufactured the hydrocarbons into carbohydrates, fungal sugars. Some of these mushrooms are very happy mushrooms. They're very large, showing how much nutrition that they could obtain. But something else happened, which was an epiphany in my life. They sporulated. The spores attract insects. Insects laid eggs. Eggs became larvae. Birds then came bringing in seeds, and our pile became an oasis of life. Whereas the other 3 piles were dead, dark, and stinky, and the PAHs, the aromatic hydrocarbons, went from 10,000 parts per million to less than 200 in 8 weeks. The last image we don't have, the entire pile was a green berm of life. These are gateway species, vanguard species that opened the door for other biological communities. So I invented burlap sacks, bunker spawn, and putting the mycelium using storm-blown debris. You can take these burlap sacks and put them downstream from a farm that's producing E. coli or other waste, or a factory with chemical toxins, and it leads to habitat restoration. So we set up a site in Mason County, Washington, and we've seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of coliforms. And I'll show you a graph here. This is a logarithmic scale, 10 to the 8th power. There's more than 100 million colonies per gram, and 10 to the 3rd power is around 1,000. In 48 hours to 72 hours, these three mushroom species reduced the amount of coliform bacteria 10,000 times. Think of the implications. This is a space-conservative method that uses storm debris, and we can be guaranteed that we'll have storms every year. So this one mushroom in particular has drawn our interest over time. This is my wife, Dusty, with a mushroom called Fomitopsis officinalis, agaricon. It's a mushroom exclusive to the old-growth forest. The Dioscorides first described in 65 AD as a treatment against consumption. This mushroom grows in Washington State, Oregon, Northern California, British Columbia, now thought to be extinct in Europe. It may not seem that large. Let's get closer. This is an extremely rare fungus. Our team, and we have a team of experts that go out, we went out 20 times in the old-growth forest last year. We found one sample to be able to get into culture. Preserving the genome of these fungi in the old-growth forest, I think, is absolutely critical for human health. I've been involved with the U.S. Defense Department BioShield program. We submitted over 300 samples of mushrooms that were boiled in hot water and mycelium, harvesting these extracellular metabolites. And a few years ago, we received these results. We have 3 different strains of agaricon mushrooms that were highly active against pox viruses. Dr. Earl Kern, who's a smallpox expert of the U.S. Defense Department, states that any compounds that have a selectivity index of 2 or more are active, 10 or greater are considered to be very active. Our mushroom strains were in the highly active range. There's a vetted press release that you can read that's vetted by DOD if you Google Stamets and smallpox, or you can go to npr.org and listen to a live interview. So encouraged by this, naturally we went to flu viruses. And so for the first time I'm showing this. We have 3 different strains of agaricon mushrooms highly active against flu viruses. Here's the selectivity index numbers. Against pox you saw 10s and 20s. Now against flu viruses, compared to the ribavirin controls, we are having extraordinarily high activity. And we're using a natural extract within the same dosage window as a pure pharmaceutical. We tried against flu A viruses, H1N1, H3N2, as well as flu B viruses. So then we tried a blend, and then a blend combination, we tried it against H5N1, and we got greater than 1,000 selectivity index. I then think that we can make the argument that we should save the old-growth forest as a matter of national defense. I became interested in entomopathogenic fungi that kill insects. Our house is being destroyed by carpenter ants. So I went to the EPA homepage, and they were recommending studies with metarhizium species, of a group of fungi that kill carpenter ants, as well as termites. I did something that nobody else had done. I actually chased the mycelium when it stopped producing spores. These are spores. This is no spores. I was able to morph the culture into a non-sporulating form. And so the industry has spent over $100 million specifically on bait stations to prevent termites from eating your house. But the insects aren't stupid. They would avoid the spores when they came close. And so I morphed the cultures into a non-sporulating form. And I got my daughter's Barbie doll dish. I put it right with a bunch of carpenter ants. We're making debris fields every day in my house. And the ants were attracted to the mycelium because there's no spores. They gave it to the queen. 1 week later, I had no sawdust piles whatsoever. And then a delicate dance between dinner and death. The mycelium is consumed by the ants. They become mummified, and boing, a mushroom pops out of their head. Now, after sporulation, the spores repel, so the house is no longer suitable for invasion. So you have a near-permanent solution for reinvasion of termites. And so my house came down. I received my first patent against carpenter ants, termites, and fire ants. Then we tried extracts, and lo and behold, we can steer insects to different directions. This has huge implications. I then received my second patent. This is a big one, something called the Alexander Graham Bell patent. It covers over 200,000 species. This is the most disruptive technology, I've been told by executives of the pesticide industry, that they have ever witnessed. This could totally revamp the pesticide industries throughout the world. You could fly 100 PhD students under the umbrella of this concept, because my supposition is that entomopathogenic fungi prior to sporulation attract the very insects that are otherwise repelled by their spores. And so I came up with a life box, because I needed a delivery system. The life box, you can be getting a DVD of the TED conference. You had soil, you had water, you have mycorrhizal and endophytic fungi, as well as spores like of the agaricon mushroom. The seeds then are mothered by this mycelium, and then you put seeds in here, and then you end up growing potentially an old-growth forest from a cardboard box. I want to reinvent the delivery system and the use of cardboard around the world so they become ecological footprints. If there's a YouTube-like a site that you could put up, you can make it interactive, zip code specific, where people could join together, and through satellite imaging systems, through virtual Earth or Google Earth, you could confirm carbon credits are being sequestered by the trees that are coming through life boxes. You could take a cardboard box delivering shoes. You could add water. I developed this for DARPA for the refugee community, corns, beans, and squash and onions. I built several containers. My wife said if I could do this, anybody could. And I ended up growing a seed garden. And you harvested the seeds. And thank you, Eric Rasmussen, for your help on this. And then harvesting the seed garden, then you can harvest the kernels. And then I just need a few kernels. I add mycelium to it. And then I inoculate the corn cobs. Now, 3 corn cobs, no other grain, lots of mushrooms begin to form, 2 million withdrawals from the carbon bank. And so this population will be shut down, but watch what happens here. The mushrooms that are harvested, but very importantly, the mycelium is converted to cellulose into fungal sugars. And so I thought, how could we address the energy crisis in this country? And we came up with ethanol. Generating ethanol from cellulose using mycelium as an intermediary, and you gain all the benefits that I described to you already. And to go from cellulose to ethanol is ecologically unintelligent. And I think that we need to be ecologically intelligent about the generation of fuels, so we build the carbon banks on the planet, renew the soils. These are the species that we need to join with. I think engaging mycelium can help save the world. Thank you very much.
Now, like I said, there's a lot in there that is, maybe woo-woo and certainly statist, that is very concerning. And I share, a lot of those concerns. But there is so much talked about in that I think is so incredible. I love one of the first examples that he brings up is how mushrooms or mycelium, they're talking about in particular, but how they are kind of a natural internet, this natural interconnectedness. Now, I've got more that I'm going to add on top of this because there's something interesting there. I mean, the idea that, how it cleans up and everything, we're going to get into all that. That idea of a natural internet, that idea of that natural interconnectedness. Now, the first thing that brings up for me actually is a philosophical concept, not necessarily an engineering one. And that is there's a saying by, I think it's Dorian Sagan, who is the son of Carl Sagan. And not a saying, but there's a quote from him, which is, life thrived and began through networking, not through combat. And I think that's a powerful statement. And I think when you look at what is provable about some of these systems, like mycelium, mushrooms, and all that, you see that, and I like the way that Paul Stamets, how Paul Stamets, kind of brought in. He said, well, kind of dark. The concept of dark matter might work the same way. Now, dark matter is a scientific concept. I think that's sort of in the air, but regardless, I don't mean that as a pun. I mean literally. I think it's all still getting figured out. But regardless, that idea, that notion, that networking, and like self-repairing networks and all this is, really kind of the natural way things come together is just a fascinating concept to consider. The idea that the internet is just that the way the internet works is an infrastructure, not how the World Wide Web works, not all that shit. Okay. But just like that concept of an infrastructure, I thought, man, I heard that and I was like, wow, that is fascinating how so much, and it's called biomimicry. There's this idea called biomimicry. Now, I have no idea. I don't think that when ARPANET was getting developed by the government that they were engaging in biomimicry and they looked at mycelium and they're like, oh, let's copy that kind of system. They definitely were trying to copy us. They were creating a system that was meant to, survive a nuclear attack. Okay. It's supposed to be that could handle that sort of situation. Ironically, yes, mycelium works in a very similar fashion, just as, Paul Stamets described. So inadvertently, they were doing a degree of biomimicry. I think that's true. But man, just that part alone blew my mind. But then in the idea of, how you could, you could use mycelium and it can do cleanup duty effectively for oil and all these different things. Now that's where things start to get interesting. There was a story, like I said, on IO9 that was all about, it was called The Technology That Will Build Our Future. And it was all about mushrooms and the way that it can handle things, the way, that it can decompose stuff, and kind of eat it up into itself in a totally safe way. Okay, now, I don't think we're going to be using mushrooms to handle nuclear waste or anything along those lines, but then we have the technology to burn up nuclear waste in and of itself. So that's not necessarily something that's, that's not a problem that needs to be solved right this second. I mean, maybe in some ways it does, but regardless, that is an interesting concept in and of itself, that it's sort of, it's this great garbage crew on the Earth. But then things get a little bit more interesting. And this is sort of the track I want to start taking you on here with talking about mushrooms. Bear with me. Okay, so, and this is actually from the IO9 story, Building the Future here. The notion that we can use fungus to mop up our nastiest environmental messes is exciting, but every day we continue to build our world up with materials that pollute and don't degrade. What if we could begin phasing out environmentally destructive plastics, foams, and synthetic building materials? What with fungi, fungi at our side, this might, or fungi, not fungi, fungi. With fungi at our side, this might actually be possible. Mycelia, incredibly resilient and naturally biodegradable as it is, may quite literally build our future. Before you recoil at the idea of a house made from mushrooms, you'll want to check out the work of mycologist and designer Phil Ross, who's been turning mushrooms into beautiful structures for over 20 years. A self-styled craft mycologist, Ross has discovered that, given the proper substrate and growth conditions, fungal mycelia can be assembled into nearly any shape and density under the sun. Now, the link is in the show notes for episode 190, where you can read more on this story, and you can also listen to the complete TED Talk and maybe see some of the pictures, that Paul Stamets was talking about. But effectively, what can be done here, according to Ross, not just according to Ross, they've done it, was you could build bricks out of mushrooms. Like that. That's the short and sweet. Bricks out of mushrooms, and these things are practically indestructible. It is amazing. Now, what gets exciting about that for me, this idea of using mushrooms, and, well, I have a couple points. One is, and I've talked about this many times, is that I look forward to the future where we start, and this is far out. We're on a far out subject here, okay? I dealt with a lot of the real world shit earlier in the episode, okay? We're in the far out now, the speculative, the heavily speculative. But I've talked about that. I get excited about the idea of actually growing technology. I don't mean growing as in growing the user base or growing more companies or things like this. I mean literally growing biotechnology, like planting seeds and or something along those lines, and then you end up with some kind of working, some kind of technology like bricks, or maybe even beyond that. When you consider that a lot of the data storage systems that are being developed now, a lot of the battery systems that are being developed now, a lot of them in them of themselves are organic. Now, they're not like, it's not like you're watering plants and then you get a battery or anything, but what a future would be if you could do that. It's a fascinating concept to consider. I know it's in science fiction, but to some degree, like with the mushroom thing, I wonder if it is. In fact, I did a very, it's probably my most famous episode that I did, a couple of years ago now. And it's called it's Sovryn Tech 2099. Okay, and I'll put the link in the show notes for that episode if you've never heard it. And what I did an episode where I recorded like I was in the year 2099, and I talked about the future. One of the interesting things that I brought up, and this is long before I knew about all this with mycelia, this concept of the idea that, idea that it is a natural internet of sorts. I talked about that this future kind of anarchist group used the way their internet was actually an internet that they literally grew, and that could be self-healing. It was like organic Ethernet cord. It was organic RJ45 going all over the place. And come to find out, mycelia kind of works that way. It sort of proves the point. There are these examples. I think biomimicry, and this is the main takeaway here for a lot of this. Mushrooms can pull a lot of this off, but biomimicry, copying the systems in nature, I think it's such a fascinating idea to do. MadeSafe is working off of a similar thing. They're working off of the idea of ant colonies to have, their system being self-healing and being able to handle whatever comes at it. That's a whole other story. But I always love the idea that, ants are the anarchists of nature. But there's a whole video on that. But anyway, the point is that I think a lot of the things, and maybe even a lot of the things that have lasted, that have stood the test of time, are ideas that either consciously or unconsciously were mimicked from nature, including the infrastructure that is the internet. I'm not talking about the World Wide Web. I'm not talking about Facebook. Okay, I'm talking about, just the overall infrastructure itself. And that if we look in that direction, the amazing things we could do. Now, I know some people get hot and bothered. They don't think, well, the ecosystem's not the environment's not a problem, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I agree. The environmentalism is a religion. There's a real problem there. But ecology is a genuine science, and there are some genuine concerns to be had when it comes to ecology. And I think a lot of them could be solved if A, we copied natural systems, or B, even used new natural systems like this. It's a fascinating concept. This article goes on from Ionine. It even goes on to talking about terraforming, where, you could literally just have drop mycelium on a planet, drop a bunch of mushrooms, and on this planet, it could start to clean up everything. It could jumpstart the entire planet's ecosystem. That's a fascinating idea. Now, terraforming, I think there's an ethical argument to be made against it that is worth considering. I'm not going to get into that here. But the future, in my opinion, the future that I want to see, and I'm all in for the long game, the future I want to see is to where kind of technology in the natural world, technology and biology, we get away from the mechanical and the metal, and you end up with this fusion. That is, again, it's been talked about in science fiction many times. Think of the Vorlons from Babylon 5, where they, their ships are near living things, that have been grown since birth, and grown up with the Vorlons since birth, stuff like this. I mean, I'm being far out as far as that goes. Okay, but if you want an idea of kind of what I'm talking about, I recommend you listen to the 2099 episode, or if you already did, you know what I'm talking about. You know where I'm going with all this. But it is awesome what we could do. Imagine it. Literally, forget about 3D printing. What if you just grew your home? And there's a possibility that could happen. This is heading towards, that direction. We're storing data on DNA, terabytes and terabytes onto DNA. Again, we're making batteries out of literal organic materials. All these different, the beauty of it is that when you pay attention to natural systems and when you use, biology and nature, like there's so much, you have millions of years of evolution that you are working with, that evolution is designed for a degree of self-sustaining, of being self-sustaining. And that's really what I want. I want things made to last. So it's a really, really exciting concept. Everything that's laid out in this article. I recommend reading that article. Check out the TED Talk overall if you want. But using these biological mechanisms, hell yeah, man, that's exciting. As soon as I saw like those mushroom bricks, I was like, this is so cool. And I think it's hot. I know some people might find it like aesthetically not very pleasing. I disagree. Everything's up to personal taste, no doubt about it. But wow. What a way, what a direction to take technology. Anyway, I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech. Oh, baby, you talk about natural systems. It doesn't get much more natural than good old-fashioned golden system, right? Or gold and silver, of course. So, if you want to get your hands on some gold and silver, you want to store your wealth, in a way that's been used for quite some time, I want you to go to Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. I'm so honored to have them as a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. They believe in everything that's going on here. Decentralization, the whole thing. They are all about it. And they're all about your personal freedom, the whole thing. In fact, so much so, they know that there's a great currency out there, not like Steemit. They know there's a great currency, or like Steam, but Bitcoin. They love Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the real fucking deal. And they are ready you can purchase whatever you want from Roberts & Roberts, Brokerage, gold, silver, palladium, platinum, whatever. And you can use Bitcoin. In fact, they are Bitcoin preferred. This is one of those companies that is on top of their game. Okay. Best companies in the world, in my opinion. They've been in business for decades. You want to get on board with Roberts & Roberts Brokerage for all your precious metals needs. They have you covered. And they'll even, they'll even buy from you as well. So it's a one-stop shop as far as precious metals goes. So go to rrbi.co and let them know that the Golden Stallion sent you, or you can go to gold.zog.ninja. That'll take you right there. Gold.zog.ninja. That's the place, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. We thank them so much for supporting Sovryn Tech.
Pixel, I'm being chased by assassin bots. I need an exit. Pixel!
Brian Sovryn, come with me if you want to leave.
Who are you?
I'm Adelaide. I'll tell you more later. Get in the vehicle.
Get in a car with a scantily clad and beautiful woman? Guess it's been my first choice before. Let's go.
First choice.
It is time for First Choice, where I cover stories that get sent in through the various channels available. Of course, you can go to contact.zog.ninja to find out where all those areas are. And like I said, I've pruned that list. I apologize. I am going to, just to keep within the 2-hour time constraints, I am going to push off the story that we're going to talk about this week into next week. But it's a doozy, and I'm going to tell you how it starts off. Okay, it is a science story, and it has to do with, because really First Choice, I kind of did that. I mean, it was sort of a hybrid with our opening story. But it has to do with the Greenland shark, a shark that lives over 400 years at a time. Amazing. Like literally, just imagine this. Imagine a animal that has lived to see, especially because it lives in, the Arctic Atlantic. Imagine an animal that has effectively been around as long as the Pilgrims came to America to today. That's nuts to consider. So it has to do with that, but it goes into a whole lot more, and perhaps we get into more of these natural systems. But I'm going to save that for next week, and I'll make this just a very short segment here, and we'll get into our following stories because, man, we've got some good ones. But I do want to say, like I said, that a lot of the ways to get in touch with the show, I have severely pruned. It's pretty much down to Twitter and email. So you can go to contact.zog.ninja. There's the contact form there, which is effectively a good way to get in touch with me through email. There are the email addresses, of course, and of course Twitter is a great way to get in touch with me. Unless you are a Patreon subscriber, then you can get in touch with me through the Patreon Messenger, and I am always on top of my game with that. So, and I have just real quick with Patreon. Some of the people that have subscribed to it, I want to make this clear here. If you go to patreon.com/sovereigntech, now there are two types of episodes there. Okay, I share from SoundCloud, which is the main Sovryn Tech page. Okay, where you can download the episodes and get the RSS feed and all that. Okay, I share those on Patreon. Now the thing is, a couple people asked about it, and I understand. Actually, Patreon to some degree is a little confusing. I'm not very happy with. They're doing better. They're making changes that make it more intuitive, but I'm a little concerned about the intuitiveness overall, at least at the moment. So when you see a normal Sovryn Tech episode, like episode 0190, like this one, or 189, 188, and all that, when you see those are just, they're just getting spread from SoundCloud. They're just getting shared from SoundCloud onto there. But then there are the Sovryn Tech subscriber content episodes, which you'll see those once you become a Patreon subscriber. Those you can download right from Patreon. That's the way to get your hands on those. And the download link is right underneath when you click on the episode page after you become a Patreon subscriber. And they're numbered. We're up to like episode 11 now as far as Patreon content. When you click on that, that's right. We've done over 20 hours of content already just in the past like month and a half. When you click on that, you can, it'll bring up the full artwork, and then underneath that, it'll give you the episode title, and you can download it from there. Or you can just stream it right from Patreon on mobile or on desktop. But you can download it right from there. If you're on mobile, just hold down, click Save Link As. If you're on your desktop, right click, whatever, to be able to get it. So that's how that works. You'll see it'll say something. It'll look like a link, or at least it'll be in that that blue color for links, right? That's been that way forever. And it'll say .mp3, and then you can download it that way. Now, the second issue that people have had with the Patreon-only episodes is the fact that a lot of people like to listen to things at like 2x speed or 1.5x or something like that. I really, really sympathize with that. I understand. So what you're going to want to do to fix that right now, until Patreon figures out some kind of system to where like they are working on an RSS feed system of some kind, but until that comes, the best thing I can recommend that you do is download the VLC media player on desktop or on mobile. And when you download the episode from Patreon, you can use VLC to increase the speed, to bring it up to 2x, 1.5, whatever you want to bring it up to, VLC can pretty much do. And that's true for desktop and mobile. So that's the way to get around that. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has been subscribing through Patreon. We get more and more people every single week. And I am so honored when we're getting towards our goal to where we can have multiple episodes of the Sovryn Tech main show available to everybody, not just Patreon subscribers, in the very near future. And then, of course, but there will always be the specials for Patreon subscribers. So anyway, thank you so much for that. I hope that helped clear a lot of that up. I really understand it is not intuitive. It's not as easy as I would have thought. Anyway, I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Hey, what? No live read. Look, I've pimped myself enough, okay? That's enough. Let's get back to some more Sovryn Tech this time, really.
Whoa, hey, you want to slow down?
I don't do slow. I move fast.
Okay, well, so you're French.
Everyone in the future speaks French.
Wait. The future?
From 2099. Permanent Autonomous Zone, Osiris-1. You've been there.
Oh, this isn't happening. It only thinks it's happening. How do I know you're from Osiris-1?
RGP fingerprint Omega 746566666.
Okay, you're legit. Hey, really, be careful. You drive like you're playing a video game.
That is how you programmed me. Game Talk.
It's time for Game Talk, where it's part of the show where we talk about video games. Woo, because I love me some video games. Well, we are coming up. It's episode 190 now. Jesus, we're coming up on, or Satan, sorry. We are coming up on episode 200 very soon, and we're going to shake things up. And there's a chance maybe I'll take Game Talk back away for a little while or take it away again, and then I'll bring it back in, another 25 episodes. I love to shake up the show, make sure there's new segments, new content. Maybe I'll do that space segment finally that I've teased possibly doing, because I think that's a fascinating subject, and people are really starting, especially with Proxima B, people seem to be really getting excited about this stuff. But anyway, speaking of space, well, no, I'm not going to go in. I'll save that for later. Like I said, the Climax, we're going to talk about that not over again, but we're going to revisit the idea of colonizing space a bit due to something very interesting I saw this week. But let's talk about other things. Oh man, as far as video games go, I got a couple things a lot to cover here, but I'm going to start off with, this is something that excited the shit out of me. Now, my favorite video game series, really overall, is Duke Nukem. And I mean, I even like Duke Nukem Forever. I talked about it on Sovryn Tech years ago. This was a game that came out in 2011. It's notorious for having taken over almost 15 years to finally get developed, released, and put out there. I still think it's a great game, especially if you played it on PC. If you played it on console, I understand there were really long load times. Well, you're playing on a console. What the hell do you what do you expect? But anyway, there is supposedly on September 2nd, just a few days away from today, there is going to be a major announcement for a new Duke Nukem game. I could not be more excited. There are some hints that maybe it's just a remake, an enhancement upon Duke Nukem 3D. If that's what it ends up being, I am all on board with that. If it's Duke Nukem Forever 2, I am all on board with that. If it's a Duke Nukem real-time strategy game, I am totally on board for that. I love the character. Duke Nukem's so great because it's just so over the top. Regardless of the violence in it, it's so ridiculous that everything is just ridiculous. And so you never take it seriously. And I really, really love that. And it's funny. I mean, yeah, Duke is sexist. Duke is this. I know. Okay. But I really, it's just so cheesy and so crazy and such a great amalgamation of so many wonderful forms of entertainment that you can't go wrong with. Just, it's all tongue in cheek. So anyway, so that's coming on. Speaking of an actual remake, that's been around for a while. A lot of people have been really appreciative that I've been announcing games that people can get their hands on, that are remakes or games old games that have perhaps just gotten finished, or even like fan mods that are games themselves. I don't really like to talk about like mods that you have to buy a game in the first place and then do the mod. I like to talk about ones that you just download, you install them, and you're done. You don't need any other. It's all self-containing, right? Like any good XC should be. But there is a Streets of Rage remake that was very popular a few years ago. You can still get your hands on it, and honestly, there's still some very quiet development going on with it. I put a link in the show notes to get your hands on it. The Streets of Rage series, of course, made popular on Genesis, and had it's had runs on other systems, and it also had a kind of an arcade run that was semi-popular. But what a great, it's Double Dragon style gaming, but what a great series. And you can grab the Streets of Rage remake. It looks so good. It plays so good. It is awesome. Just head to the link to the show notes at sovryntech.com or zog.ninja. Find episode 190, and it'll be there for you, baby. It is an amazing play. And I want to talk about remakes some more because I think this is a really huge topic and there's a lot to cover on it. But before I do, the other news that I want to bring up as far as gaming news that came out this week, two things. One is, and I think this is really interesting, video game streaming, as in watching people play a video game and streaming that play experience, obviously has been popular for some years. Twitch, really made it hot. Some other systems. Microsoft recently bought, their own game streaming business. We talked about that last week. And there's some others. You would kind of think, YouTube, like Google's getting in on it with YouTube Gaming, Google/Alphabet. There was an interesting move made, and I'm curious how this is all going to shape up. But apparently Facebook has gotten not exclusive, but official rights to do live streaming of games of Overwatch, which is this, just wildly successful game out of Blizzard Entertainment, of course, Blizzard, whatever with Activision, but Blizzard Entertainment historically being known for the Warcraft series, which we've talked about recently, and so many other, StarCraft, Lost Vikings. I mean, just tons of great games. Diablo that they've been coming out with, and Overwatch is just another feather in their cap. It's another hit for them, and I find it interesting that Facebook has Facebook Live to where they're able to do this, but they didn't even They're doing an interesting play, not in buying a streaming service that's out there, because there are some others that they could have acquired. But it's an interesting play that they're going right to a video game company and saying, we want to stream your games. That's a hell of a move. And Blizzard is unique in that, Blizzard games, largely, World of Warcraft and really Overwatch and some of these other ones, they're independent, but they're massively successful. And what I mean by independent, not that they're indie games. Blizzard is a AAA gaming house, but they're independent in that they don't rely on any platform. They don't rely upon Steam. They don't rely upon Origin or GOG.com or itch, or any of those. They are their own, and Battle.net's been around forever. They've really been ahead of the curve in a lot of ways of what people consider popular now with multiplayer and all this different stuff. So I find it fascinating that Facebook would attach, to them. And I'll tell you, I wonder if there isn't some kind of a larger play being made here with Facebook, working with Overwatch and seeing perhaps how viable this is. Because wouldn't it be interesting if Facebook eventually turned into sort of a second life, but did so in a more gamified way by maybe like integrating with World of Warcraft, or maybe what everybody's been hoping for a decade, World of StarCraft? I wonder. You have this interesting ability to attach the largest social components on the planet to one of the largest gaming gamer bases on the planet, and one of the most popular. And known for such high quality. I mean, people are just lining up anytime. I mean, they have their own convention, BlizzCon. It's a huge deal. So I think this is really something. And Facebook's got the money to buy out Blizzard straight up, and just take Blizzard. You don't need the rest of anything else that they were attached with, with Activision, whatever else. Just take Blizzard. I wouldn't be shocked if that sort of thing happens. The other interesting news, I heard a term that I think it's new. I don't think it's been talked about before, but it kind of gets in line with something that I've been wanting to really see in the future of gaming. And what the term is microconsoles. Now, we've talked about the classic NES that Nintendo is releasing in November, which is, It's the size of the palm of your hand. It looks like a classic Nintendo Entertainment System from the 80s. All it has is a power cord, and there's nothing to it. There's no cartridges or anything. It has 30 games automatically built in, you plug it in. There's no internet, nothing like that. These games don't update. You can't add more, at least as far as we know. Even though there's a USB port for the power, so maybe something interesting could get done with that, but regardless, whatever. And, you can plug in a couple controllers and away you go. This is being labeled a microconsole now. I've never heard that term before, but I love it. And I want to see more of these, as I've already said in the past. It's just now, whenever I use the word microconsole, you're going to know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these things that are not these, all-in-ones, like, an Xbox One or, a PlayStation 4, or even something other, something else that would come out from Nintendo. So microconsoles, big deal. And again, my theory with that is that eventually we're going to run into games like, say, Blizzard games, like an Overwatch, or maybe League of Legends, which isn't Blizzard, but, is also an independent game, as in you don't get it through any other platform than itself, where they would actually release, the hardware itself would come out. And that hardware would be all you needed, and it would be all you needed for all time. So you'd buy the game and the hardware to play it, other than a screen of some kind and maybe a controller, and you'd have that for all time. Though it'd be cool if they did the controller too, because then you could customize keys and everything. But yeah, microconsoles, something to keep an eye out for, no doubt about it. Wow, I was going to talk about, there's an interesting case about all of these remakes that are getting taken down and being legally attacked. I was going to talk about that, but this show is going by so fast, I don't have time. So whatever, I'll save all of that. I'll save that subject for next week. We got to talk about the Facebook thing, which I think is some interesting analysis, something to keep an eye out for. Anyway, all right, we'll talk all about that in next week's Game Talk. Let's get to some more Sovryn tech.
In every age, a technology is created that upends the foundations of society. The wheel, the printing press, the internet. Now, in a world sliding into financial chaos, a new technology is changing the way monetary systems work around the world. It is called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a new form of money, controlled not by banks, governments, or corporations, but through mutual commerce between free individuals. To learn more, visit weusecoins.com.
Pixel says it should be this panel.
We need to hack into the control center to shut down all of those assassin bots.
Well, you're the android. Can't you just jack in?
Oui, but the way I connect is more like a jack off.
Was that a joke?
Hacking is no joke.
Directly connecting certainly beats doing it with the keyboard.
You're notorious for your love of cyber sex.
Okay, now that was a joke. Just get hacking.
A quick hack solves everything. HackSec.
It is time for HackSec, where we talk issues of hacking and security. And woo boy, did the nature of hacking really change in just the past few weeks. What I have here is a story, and I mean it. I mean literally, like the entire game has, in a very real sense, changed. I have a story from Wired, and this is from August 5th, 2016. So like I said, it's just been in the past few weeks. And it's titled, "Hackers Don't Have to Be Human Anymore. This Bot Battle Proves It." So maybe some of you have heard about this. If not, we're going to get into some analysis on it, but it has some very fascinating repercussions, I think, on a lot of things, on really, the role of humans, the role of security in general. And I think it has a lot to say about some of the zero-day issues that we were talking about very early on in this episode. This is genuinely huge, in my opinion, and I don't think it's being oversold, because you're going to get a look into perhaps what some people are saying of an excellent, deployment of artificial intelligence. Okay, but the difference here is that, again, the term artificial intelligence, I mean, so many words are getting, so many terms are getting bantied about: machine learning, strong, artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, light general. I mean, all these different versions of it. And so my point being is that what we're going to talk about here, though some would claim that this is more of that strong artificial intelligence to where they start thinking like humans, I don't think that's necessary. I think there's some interesting concepts to bring up here. Let's read into the story a bit, and then I want to get into some commentary on it. Last night at the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas, 7 autonomous bots proved that hacking isn't just for humans. The Paris Ballroom played host to the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge. God damn it, it's DARPA. Fuck. Anyway, the Golden Stallion's personal commentary there. Anyway, the first hacking contest to pit bot against bot rather than human against human. Designed by 7 teams of security researchers from across academia and industry, the bots were asked to play offense and defense, fixing security holes in their own machines while exploiting holes in the machines of others. Their performance surprised and impressed some security veterans, including the organizers of this $55 million contest and those who designed the bots. During the contest, which played out over a matter of hours, one bot proved it could find and exploit a particularly subtle security hole similar to one that plagued the world's email system a decade ago, the Crackadder bug, which that was a huge one back in the day. Until yesterday, this seemed beyond the reach of anything other than a human. Quote, "That was astounding," end quote, said Mike Walker, the veteran white hat hacker who oversaw the contest. Quote, "Anybody who does vulnerability research will find that surprising," end quote. In certain situations, the bots also showed remarkable speed, finding bugs far quicker than a human ever could. But at the same time, they proved that automated security is still very flawed. One bot quit working midway through the contest. Another patched a hole, but in the process, crippled the machine it was supposed to protect. All the gathered researchers agreed that these bots are still a very long way from grasping all the enormously complex bugs a human can. According to preliminary and unofficial results, the $2 million first place prize will go to Mayhem, a bot fashioned inside startup For All Secure, which grew out of research at Carnegie Mellon. This was the bot that quit working, but you shouldn't read that as an indictment of last night's contest. On the contrary, it shows that these bots are a little smarter than you might expect. So I'm going to skip ahead a bit in the article and get into where they start talking more about how it went down. But effectively, this event, this DARPA challenge that was being held, this bot versus bot, they really turned it into a spectacle. There were like color commentators like you'd have in a wrestling match. The visualization of everything, they kind of pulled a trick, sort of like in the movie Hackers from 1995, one of my favorite movies of all time, even though a lot of what it does is bullshit. I talked about it in the recent Patreon-only episode, the Sovryn Top 8 Movies. I went into much depth with that film, the pros and cons of it. But anyway, they had like this sort of Tron-styled, which, boy, talk about one of my favorite movies, but this Tron-esque, display showing how all of these bots were doing what they did, which obviously in real hacking, none of that is so. I mean, it's all command line stuff and, things that you just don't see. So, there's no graphic interface. That was the problem in the movie Hackers, is everything was like a GUI and it all looked beautiful. And it's like, hacking looks nothing like that. That's a problem in Hollywood in general. And they kind of brought it here, but at least, because this was being, at DEF CON, it was just, DARPA was holding the event at DEF CON there, which DEF CON is an amazing event to attend. I've been to them in years past, haven't been in a little while, but maybe that'll change in the future. So anyway, this is being held there, and the people at DEF CON obviously know, okay, that's not what hacking looks like. But, they made it a spectacle, which I think is fascinating. Anyway, let's read on more here further on in the article. Held each year in Las Vegas, the DEF CON Security Conference has long included a hacking contest called Capture the Flag. But last night's contest wasn't Capture the Flag. The contestants were machines, not human. And with its Tron-like visualization, not to mention the two-color commentators, which I mentioned, they were calling the action like it was a sporting event, DARPA provided a very different way of experiencing a hacking contest. Several thousand people packed into the Paris Ballroom. The crowd was typical DEF CON, much facial hair, ponytails, and piercings, plus the odd Star Trek uniform. But what they saw was something new. Now, I love that, the odd Star Trek uniform, because that just proves what I've said many times on Sovryn Tech, that Star Trek is quintessential to so many people being into technology and computers in general. It is the impetus for all of that in many ways, in my opinion. Reading on here, rematch with the past. The 7 teams loaded their autonomous systems onto the 7 supercomputers late last week, and sometime Thursday morning, DARPA set the contest in motion. Each supercomputer launched software that no one outside DARPA had ever seen, and the 7 bots looked for holes. Each bot aimed to patch the holes on its own machine, while working to prove it could exploit holes on others. DARPA awarded points not just for finding bugs, but for keeping services up and running. To show that no one else had access to the 7 supercomputers, the bots really were computing on their own. DARPA erected its network so that an obvious air gap sat between the machines and the rest of the ballroom. Then, every so often, a robotic arm would grab a Blu-ray disc from the supercomputer side and move it across the gap. The disc included all the data needed to show what was happening inside the machines, and after the arm fed this into a system on the other side of the gap, DARPA's Tron-like visualization appeared on the giant TV looming over the arena. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second, and this doesn't have to do with the larger subject necessarily. Okay, but I find it interesting that, like I said, there is this sort of this social, the societal narrative, this narrative within civilization that everything's going digital, everything's going streaming. We don't want physical copies of anything. But then when you want to do things secure, like at a hacking contest, what are you breaking out? A fucking Blu-ray. I get so annoyed when I hear that, oh, no, yeah, get people, it almost feels conspiratorial to me how much companies in general, and I mean all kinds of companies, and just society in general seems to be against this whole idea of having physical media any longer. And of course I bring up, how does Facebook, oh, you don't want Blu-rays. Oh, Blu-rays are so last century, blah, blah, blah. And I know they're kind of talking about movies, but again, you get rid of them as being used for movies, and overall you get rid of it as a consumer technology in many ways, even if they want to use it for data, right? Okay, but again, I bring this up all the time. What does Facebook use for long-term storage of their data? Not servers. They use Blu-ray discs. Quintessential technology, physical media, like optical discs and others, are absolutely essential to having any form of security, with your data security. And again, that's that sustainability, that long lasting that we're talking about so much throughout this entire episode. Anyway, I want to read on. To show that no one else had, or reread that part. DARPA counted countless security holes on the 7 machines, but some were particularly intriguing. As the curtain went up on the contest, DARPA's color commentators, astrophysicists, blah, 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 whoever they were, revealed that some of these in the contest were modeled on infamous security holes from the internet's earlier days. This included the Heartbleed bug. Of course, we all remember that from 2014, the biggest bug the internet's really ever seen. The bug exploited by the SQL slammer worm, or the SQL, and the crack-adder bug, which we already mentioned. DARPA called them rematch challenges. Competition was divided into rounds. Anyway, they explain how it all worked out. But I'm more interested in how, what exactly happened. Let's read this here. Crack-adder cracked. In round 30, Rubius, which was one of the bots, was smart enough to remove the patch that was causing its own machine so much trouble, and its performance rebounded. But it continued to trail Mayhem, as well as McAfish, which is another bot, a bot designed by a team from the University of California, Santa Barbara. McAfish sat in last place for the early rounds, probably because it patched every hole it found. Unlike Mayhem, it was light on game theory, as team member Jan Shastijavili, later told me. But as the game continued, McAfish started climbing the leaderboard. It seemed to have a knack for finding particularly complex or subtle bugs. Certainly, it was the only bot that proved it could exploit the bug modeled on Crack-Adder. This exploit was so impressive because it fingered a bug that isn't always there. Before exploiting the hole, the bot must find a series of commands to create the hole. Basically, it must find the right route among an enormous array of possibilities. That number is so large, the bot can't try them all. It must somehow hone in on a method that will actually work. It must operate with a certain subtlety, mimicking a very human talent. But despite McAfish's human flair, Mayhem remained in the lead. So we're getting a bunch of different stories here as far as each one of them was taking a different tack, which I think is really interesting. But let's read on here. The unintended bug, that's what this is subtitled. Then in round 52, Mayhem quit working. For some reason, it could no longer submit patches or attempt exploits against other machines, and it remained dormant throughout round 60 and round 70. There was 96 rounds within it overall. As the game continued, other bots showed a surprising knack for the task at hand. At one point, Xandra, a bot designed by a team from the University of Virginia and a company called Grammatech, exploited a bug that DARPA didn't even know was there. And a second bot, Jima, designed by a 2-person team from Idaho, successfully patched the bug. And yet Mayhem stayed atop the leaderboard. It was still top after round 80, and it was top after round 90, even though it remained dormant. And then just as suddenly, in round 95, it started working again. In round 96, it won the contest, at least according to preliminary results. Its play in the first 50 rounds was so good, its game theory so successful, that the other bots couldn't catch up. Over the remaining rounds, Mayhem's patches continued to provide defense, and though it wasn't able to patch additional holes or exploit new holes in other machines, enough of its services continued to run as they should, in part because it had often decided not to patch. Mayhem didn't just patch and exploit security holes, it weighed the benefits of patching and exploiting against the costs. It was smart. So the idea of game theory, that's the end of it there, but just to break in. So the idea of game theory is that, it's classic chess in many ways, where you're willing to sacrifice one thing to be able to get, have a greater lead in the future. Now, that's fascinating that Mayhem in particular, was so good at that. There is something to that fact. I'll give credit where credit's due. Now, granted, as the article is very clear to make the case, and as is shown by the whole event, bots are not prepared to, replace humans as far as, doing hacking or, overall patching, security exploits. But what's interesting is that you have here, we're talking earlier about self-healing systems, self-sustaining systems, and biomimicry and all this. This is one of the starts of where software is getting into the biomimicry game, in that it is self-healing. Like these bots could actually heal each other, or even perhaps almost have a symbiotic relationship, a remora to the shark, right? And the shark kind of, sort of gets a little bit of a, maybe even gets a benefit for being clean because the remora, the remora gets to eat off of the shark and the shark gets clean because the remora is eating everything off of it, right? I'm not saying that that's necessarily the deal, but it's just an example. So I think this is really huge what's happening here. I get the idea that people are saying, well, they're pulling off tricks that only the human brain can do. I understand that, but I don't know that's that much needed. What's interesting is that what I think this showed and that a lot of people are kind of missing in this DARPA challenge, and fuck DARPA, okay, if I didn't make that clear already, fuck the government, fuck DARPA, and fuck the military that it serves. But what's interesting is that if these systems were working more in concert, they could have used all of their different setups and styles to where one of them could have been, repairing Mayhem, and Mayhem could have been doing, the excellence in game theory to where, it knew, okay, no, I need to jump to this, jump to this, jump to this, jump to this. And then you had the other one that found bugs that the designers didn't even know were there. So there's this fascinating teamwork, and I know some people are going to say, well, there's already some server systems that are try to do the same thing, but this is new because these were air gapped. There was no human intervention whatsoever, and I would venture to say that there might have been a degree of learning involved that happened here. Okay, this would maybe fall under a very simple sense of machine learning that occurred. I think now, is this a case where hackers are going to get replaced? That was sort of the larger gist that everybody was trying, that a lot of news outlets were trying to say. It's like, oh, now, people are just going to use computers to do hacking. Humans don't need to hack. Well, I don't think so. I don't think that that's ever going to happen. And this gets into a larger point I don't want to spend a ton of time on. But the idea that I've brought up to you many times that a lot of these machines, what was impressive with Mayhem is that it didn't think like a Google search. Okay, as to where there was the other one that was, it was plugging everything that kind of came at it, and thus it was able to survive. There's something to be said for that. But the fact that, based upon the contest rules, on how many patches and all that, Mayhem was able to do it by, enacting game theory, by thinking, okay, no, I'm not going to do it one at a time. I'm not going to do this in an orderly fashion. Okay, I am going to make leaps in judgment, or at least what equate to leaps in judgment in the software, in how the bots were set up. And that's what humans are really good at. This is a lot of people talk about. There's a lot of neuroscientists I know today that always want to bring this up. And if you've heard me talk about this before, I apologize, but it needs to be driven home. A lot of neuroscientists talk about the fact that we need the brain to be more, more collated. It needs to be more organized. We don't want our thoughts to be so disparate. We want it to be like Google. Like when you're thinking, it's kind of like a Google search. I totally fucking disagree with that. Okay, and I think Mayhem might prove the point that the more secure system is the system that that doesn't do things in order at all, and that it's jumping around and it's making moves that seem counterintuitive and that may even like shut it down halfway through, say, a task, like how it shut down during round 50. But at the end of the day, it's still the winner. It's still on top, and in fact, it even came back at round 95, and again, the last round was 96. So this idea, this kludginess, the fact that the human brain is not orderly at all, I think is a bonus. It's what puts us above all of these computers. Now, again, Mayhem is like pointing in that direction, but I don't think I don't know that it's doing so independently. There's still a lot of research that has to come out of this. I think this is going to be something looked at and written about for years to come. Okay, but I think it does prove in an abstract sense that you don't want things to be ordered and orderly. You don't need to do things, one at a time, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, I'm not making a case for multitasking, but the idea is that you want to make these logical leaps. You want to do these quantum leaps in thinking. Okay, and that's where real brilliance comes. That's where that comes. That's where a real win comes in the end. And ironically, is that biomimicry happening here during this DARPA challenge? Because that's how the human brain works, and that's how, intelligence in general, sapience, more particularly, that higher order intelligence might actually work. Well, there's a lot to take in on this. But also at the same time, I think it's very exciting that people, one of the teams was it was a 2-person team from Idaho that, did the trick. Like they were in this game. That, people could program their own bots to do a lot of their security and to automate their security. I love the idea. I really do. I love the idea. I get excited about technologies that allow individuals, not groups, but individuals to become, one-person economies, one-person studios, one-person countries, maybe, if you want to use that. Anyway, I'll be back with more.
The reviews are in, and Babylon 5's a winner. The New York Daily News says Babylon 5 could make Star Wars look like a walk in the park. The Chicago Sun-Times calls it a welcome addition to the sci-fi universe. Impressive, perfectly scaled for TV, raves the LA Times. And the Kansas City Star says Babylon 5 is one space station you're likely to want to visit frequently. See for yourself what everyone's talking about on Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5. Adelaide, why are we stopping?
In the future, we have a custom.
What's the custom?
After a successful mission, a team usually is love, a ménage à trois, or orgy.
Yeah, there's only 2 of us.
I already contacted the others to come join us. I love women too.
Whoa, Adelaide, you're beautiful, but you're an android.
I am fully functional. I am programmed in multiple techniques, a broad variety of...
Wow, I guess so. You did say you move fast. Adelaide, the future is going to be so good.
The climax.
Woo! It is time for the climax. And to quote myself from the little interstitial there, the future is going to be so good, or at least it could be. And this week, I came across a gem, just a fascinating, not perfect, but a fascinating piece of media. And this piece of media is from 1978. It is approximately 40 minutes long. It's actually like 38 minutes and change. And it is a movie. It was a movie made. I don't know that it got any kind of wide theatrical release. There's not a whole ton of information on the background of this film. This film is somewhat of a mystery, which makes me feel good because I feel bad that I've never heard of it before. But it's called Libra, Libra. Now, if you want to find out a lot more about this, and if you actually even want to watch the film, you can go to the link in the show notes for episode 190 of Sovryn Tech. Of course, you can go to sovryntech.com to find all that, or zog.ninja as well. Both sites will get you where you need to go. And this film is, to put it simply, this film is very libertarian. Super libertarian. It's from 1978. Now, it doesn't have, the effects aren't the greatest. Not all the acting is the greatest. I mean, there's some great actors in this movie. Before I get into who they are, I'll give you the gist of the movie. The movie, it takes place in 2003, the future. And it starts off on Earth. I think it's showing off New York City. If I remember, it's showing off New York City in the beginning of it. And you have this world government and everything is just going to shit. It is central planning, run wild. And so everything's, rough, looking bad. And it opens up with this meeting of various investors, like at a bank or whatever. And they're complaining about the fact, well, are we allocated to be able to use heat today? And the power keeps going out during this. I mean, even for the bankers, the power keeps going out and they have to, they have to light candles in the middle of the meeting and everything. I mean, it's kind of funny. And they're talking about potentially investing in this space colony that's based on a space station called Libra. And Libra, their claim to fame is that they built this space station. It was this group that did it back in the 70s. Of course, obviously, this didn't happen. At least not really. Well, no, yeah, it didn't happen. But we're going to get into the realm of speculation. But anyway, there was a space station that got built, and what they did is that they set up these solar panels, these entire solar collectors, and with these solar collectors, they are able to microwave beam down energy to the Earth. And they sell off that energy, and that's how, Libra moves on. That's how they sustain. And even though the station itself seems to be very self-sustaining, the station actually looks very much like Babylon 5. In fact, there's a lot of ideas mentioned in it that smack of Babylon 5 isms as well. So I kind of wonder if good old JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, knew a thing or two about Libra, about this little movie that's so rare. But that's the gist. And the plot, kind of not the climax, but the conflict in the film is this, one guy is going up, these two people, well, a few people anyway, are flying up to Libra to visit. And one of them is a world senator, from that world government, going there to try and regulate Libra. And the other guy is representing the investors that I mentioned earlier who are interested in investing in Libra. So that's the conflict of the movie. And anyway, there's some great actors in this. James Hong is in it, who, if you remember, he played, the main heavy, the main villain in Big Trouble in Little China. And he's been, he's an Asian actor, or Asian American, I think, actually, that has been in just a ton of kung fu movies, and all that stuff. As soon as you see him, you know him. He was even in Revenge of the Nerds too. He trained Booger. But anyway, Patricia McPherson's in it, which that's amazing. I've only seen Patricia McPherson in two things. She played Bonnie on Knight Rider, one of my favorite shows of all time. Which she would repair kit and everything. So it was kind of cool to see her again for a few minutes. She was also in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that I really love, where there's that female-run planet, Angel 1. Great episode from the first season of The Next Generation. Anyway, so Patricia McPherson's in it. James Avery is probably the most famous. He's well known for playing Uncle Phil in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the kind of the dad figure to Will Smith's character. In that show, that show was a huge hit, and I enjoyed it. But anyway, so you've got some serious actors in this, and actually James Avery is very thin in this. Where in his Uncle Phil usually he's significantly larger. And how ironic that his Uncle Phil, he's playing a Supreme Court judge or some kind of court judge of some kind, and in this he's playing the head of a very limited kind of Ayn Randish described government. That runs Libra. He's sort of the head of it. And he ends up kind of at the end being the sort of John Galt-like character that has a debate with that world senator that comes to Libra. It's an interesting movie. Like I said, the effects aren't the greatest. You could laugh at them, but it, in a tongue-in-cheek way, and you could kind of tell that this movie was meant for maybe college audiences or maybe high school audiences. And it was made by a group out of San Diego that I can't find out anything on, that was called World Research Inc., and particularly their division, WRI Education. I would guess that they were a group of objectivists with a capital O, because they still believed in having a government on the station Libra. Yeah, so I mean, that again, that's just a guess. But there's a large, objectivist contingent in California, obviously, and that whatever. I'm a lowercase o objectivist. I definitely believe in the three axioms, or I don't believe them. They are the three axioms. I'm all on board with that. A lot of what Rand had to say was really wonderful. But it's a film that, yeah, again, don't take it too seriously, but it was so cool to see this notion that not that I thought I had independently, but that I didn't think was really that old, to where, because again, this is from 1978, to where the idea is that we could build that little groups of people, and in fact, Libra has a population of 10,000, which that's interesting how small that is, how small that group is. That might, that's way outside of the Dunbar number, but that is a lot smaller than I think a lot of people, usually think of. When they think about space stations, in the far-flung future, even though this movie got the far-flung future very wrong. But it's interesting, this idea of, group of, liberty-oriented people or whatever, just, some kind of subculture going off into a space station, building their own thing, and creating their own little paradise in the space station. And here it was being done in 1978, and a lot of the ideas are right on. In fact, they got a who's who of scientists to commentate, or, to help make the film. Perhaps most famous is Gerard O'Neill, who I had the great pleasure when I was younger that I got to read his book, The High Frontier, Human Colonies in Space, which set off in many ways. I mean, Gerard O'Neill was a big fucking deal back in the day. He was from Princeton University. He'd be on Johnny Carson. He was the guy that really put space colonization in the mainstream in so many ways. Just a brilliant guy. Not really liberty-minded, but a brilliant guy nonetheless. And I think he was probably just happy to help out with a movie that would, espouse his ideas, regardless of whether he agreed with them ideologically or not. So there's a lot of hardcore science in this little 40-minute film. It really is worth watching. In fact, it's interesting, too, because a lot of Gerard O'Neill's works, in fact, there's a great book by Victor Corman, probably my favorite by Victor Corman, a science fiction book called Kings of the High Frontier, that I also happen to have a copy of. In fact, I have a signed copy. But it's just a wonderful read. In fact, Kings of the High Frontier is a direct response to, or not response, but obviously was inspired by Gerard O'Neill's work of High Frontier. His own book that came out in 85. So anyway, I thought this was so cool. It was also interesting. The movie was directed by a woman, Patty Newman. I tried to look into who Patty Newman is. I have no idea. If anybody listening to the sound of my voice knows, more about this, I would love to hear it. But IO9 covered it, and it was kind of sad because they were really ripping on the movie. The movie doesn't need to be ripped on. In fact, I think there's a point where, and I can't confirm this because the credits are kind of slim, but there's a point where I think when they're showing off some of the construction things that Libra does, that it's showing CGI. And that's got to be pretty early, because I think the first use of CGI in a movie was Young Sherlock Holmes by Steven Spielberg back in 81, 82. I thought that was the first. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe there's other things. But I don't know how that all shapes up. But I think there was a point where they're using CGI in this. And that alone makes it kind of a trailblazer, I think. So anyway, it's an enjoyable film. Some of the points that get brought up, some of the ethical points. In fact, what's really interesting. So there's a computer system that gets sold on Libra, and it's called Abacus. And when you ask Abacus for an opinion, and it depends on what you ask it. If you ask it to tell you about something, it gives you, this interesting encyclopedic knowledge, on whatever it is. Like a guy asks it about his watch, and it tells it everything about his watch. But when the guy says, well, what watch do you think I should have gotten? And Abacus says precision, like decision, but with the word free in front of it. And when he says this, it's interesting because he's like, well, what the hell does that mean? And the woman explains to him, this is the investor, the investor representative that comes up. And the woman explains to him on Libra, she says, oh, no. It's like, yeah, it knows so much, all the information that it can collate, it collates, but it's not here to tell you what to do. And I was like, oh, yes. So this thing's like Cortana, right? But without all the advertisers in the background. It was really, really slick. And it talked about the importance of having a lot of transparent information and transparent databases. Transparent as in like open. Because it said that this way there's no like reputation system to be gained. I mean, not that I don't think other people think like me, but some of these things I thought were largely not very popular and no one else really, they were more, like the idea of not wanting reputation systems and stuff like that. I don't think I'm original in that, but I do think I'm kind of rare. But to find out that people were sort of hinting at that idea back in 1978 in this beautiful little film, oh, it's fucking phenomenal. I think that's great. So many of the different things that they laid out, they didn't have a high population on there. They even brought up, we were talking about environmentalism earlier. Like this movie had no bones about, saying the government is destroying the environment. So it even kind of had a little bit of environmentalist message, which I think gets lost on a lot of, or it had an ecological message. An environmental message would be the religion of environmentalism, which I think, anyway, that's a whole other subject. But I thought that was so cool, to have all of these little pieces in place and to have it all come out, inside of like 40 minutes. And it was so awesome because it also drove home the point. Because again, the regulator goes back to talk to the cartels because what the world government and the cartels, it even describes corporatism. Like that the energy companies on planet Earth are afraid of, the solar energy that Libra is so abundantly providing, and that it could loosen the stranglehold that these energy cartels have on planet Earth. I thought that, that was fascinating. And again, I don't think this was made by like the Venus Project or anything like that. I literally think this was very, very objectivist because there wasn't any there didn't seem to be a whole lot of technocracy. Quite the opposite. Technocracy is a lot of central planning and control. This seemed to be, especially in the display of Abacus, seemed to be quite the opposite of that. Unfortunately, it didn't show off any sex, but it did show off that corporatism because, the cartels are telling the government, you need to go stop Libra. You need to go regulate those guys. And what was so cool is the world senator comes back and says, look, how are we going to regulate them in space? We can't do that. How is this going to work? And I was like, yeah, that's the message. That's what you tell them. Look, if we could just get out of the reach of these fucks, out of the, this corporatism, governments and corporations and everything, you could really have some freedom, and you could maybe push some of that freedom back, to help others. Oh, it's so cool. I mean, it's corny, it's cheesy, the effects aren't great, but shit, man, I thought it was such a cool little film, especially for 1970. Check it out. The link is in the show notes for episode 190. I totally recommend it. Anyway, enough of that. That's enough Sovryn Tech for this week. I don't want to be going into much of an overtime. Carpe Lucem, everybody. Woo! Thank you so much for everybody that's subscribed on Patreon. Again, patreon.com/SovrynTech. Head over to that. You can sign up too. Get all the content that's coming out, baby. We got some great stuff coming out this week too. Woo! I'll see you on the other side. What a week.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. And connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.